Next item, we have the public interview for 2 positions on the Planning and Zoning Commission. As you know, Mr. President, members of council, in District 2, Ms. Hoey Stevens is stepping aside and resigning effective July 1. We appreciate her years of service and appreciate all that she did on the commission. And Mr. Schaefer has nominated Mr. Gregory Scott Collins to that position. Mr. Collins did submit an application that I provided to you a few weeks back. I've also provided a copy of the same application to you at your desk. And if I don't have any questions, we will invite Mr. Collins up and begin the interview process. Mr. Collins, welcome.
Can I say just one thing very quickly?
Mr. Schaefer.
I want to, first of all, thank Kim Hoey Stevenson for her service. She did a phenomenal job, and she's to be commended. And I just want to let everybody know that Mr. Collins, I did an exhaustive search and talked to probably a couple dozen people in the district and consulted with Mr. Lawson, probably to his chagrin too many times, but on ideas, and he was extremely helpful. Mr. Collins was referred to me. I called all the state reps, state senators, former state senator, the mayors in my district, many city council people in my district, and Mr. Collins was referred to me by city councilman out of Rehoboth, and who speaks very highly of him and knew him and had worked with him. And I think it's very important. One of the criteria I looked for was somebody that had no ties to the development community and could come in with a clean slate and would follow the ordinances of the state of Delaware and of Sussex County. And I think Mr. Collins embodies all of that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. Mr. Collins. Welcome and thank you. There's a button on the microphone there if you want to push that so we can hear. Okay. So for today's interview, I'm going to go through the application information that was provided to you. I'm just going to ask the question and then you can provide your response. And if council has any questions through this interview, by all means ask, or after we get through the questions, they'll have additional questions. All righty. I'll begin. Please provide a narrative of your background and why you want to serve as an appointed member of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Lawson. So I've always been employed in the private sector, but I've always had a desire to serve the public. And when, about 10 years ago, I came to Rehoboth Beach for the first time, into Sussex County, to Dewey Beach, I found a lot of connections here. I recognized some of the character that is present in the community and wanted to, basically serve the interests of strengthening economic opportunities while also helping to kind of preserve the character of the area. And I realize that these sorts of positions are somewhat thankless, and from my perspective, my point of view, it's an obligation as a citizen to be able to step up for these sorts of opportunities when they come up, and make sure that the interests of the county and the citizens are appropriately represented, enforcing what is inside the ordinances that have been passed by the state and this council. So I spent the bulk of my life in rural areas, growing up in kind of a farm community with a university town nearby. And so I come to appreciate all of the different aspects of what makes Sussex County a great place to live. One of my really good friends describes it as paradise that we live in. So it has, all these great resort communities, but it also has a great agricultural foundation, and lots of different diverse communities. And it's important that we do what we can to preserve and protect all of that for the benefit of all citizens of Sussex County. At the same time, these positions are constrained by what is in writing. And so what is in law, what's in different ordinances is essentially paramount, and what needs to be the guiding foundation for anything that's decided by the Planning and Zoning Commission. So So ultimately, my desire is to make sure we sustain the character of the county to the extent that we can, make improvements, create opportunities for those who are in the county. At the same time, has to be within the letter of the law.
All right. Thank you. I'll move on to the next question, unless there are additional questions from, okay. Have you ever served on any boards or commissions that have decision-making authority? If yes, please describe your experience.
No, I have not.
Okay.
I got a couple questions. Sure. Have you ever attended a Planning and Zoning Commission meeting?
I have not, actually. No, no, sir.
Have you ever read any of their decisions? Have you ever read any of their decisions they rendered?
I have read some decisions in the past, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And I have a question.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
I sat on the Planning and Zoning Commission for some time, and it does take quite a bit of time reading, understanding the applications, and then also visiting the sites. That's pretty much, I think you need to do that most all the time. How does your time work out? Will you have the time to do that?
So as it happens, I work for a UK-led organization, and most of my, I would say, committed business hours happen before 2 p.m. Eastern Time. So I would have time to finish the vast majority of my responsibilities for my employer, and then I would be able to spend time, obviously, doing what I need to do for the commission.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Shaver.
I understand you had the opportunity, and Mrs. Stevenson availed herself to you to discuss this position before I asked you to serve.
Yes.
And thankfully, she didn't talk you out of it or put the fear of God in you. But and did you have an opportunity to look at any of the past Planning and Zoning Commission meetings, as she may have suggested that you might want to do?
I did look at some of the past planning and zoning meetings, and so we had a really lengthy chat before I was put forward, and I would say that while she definitely appreciated the opportunity to serve, I think it's clear there's a desire to see more progress that I heard from her, and to see the interests of the broader community met, to make recommendations to this council that will improve planning and zoning ability to actually help protect the character of the community is sort of the crux of our conversation and what I've seen in the minutes that were shared. So I would say overall my thought is that this commission is going to be bound by whatever this council wants, in terms of representing the interests of all of our constituents out in the community. There are times where it does appear like some property developers might have the upper hand based on the way that the ordinances are currently written, and that can obviously continue, and it is as it is in writing, and that's how it must be enforced. At the same time, I think the commission owes it to the citizens of the county to come back to this council with recommendations to strengthen any requirements that we think help protect the nature of this community. So I hope that answers the question.
It does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with our comprehensive plan, 10-year plan?
I have reviewed it at a high level over the last few days, yes.
Okay. That was my question, if you had an opportunity to read it. Mike on, yeah, can't even remember that. Just for the mic, my question was about whether or not you had an opportunity to read the comprehensive plan, and if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I have reviewed it, again, at a high level, kind of scanning through it, and I would say that, at a high level, my thought is that we need to improve the ability to preserve some of our spaces, open spaces, ensure that some of the requirements for development are more specific than they might be today. So, if you want setbacks for, if you want to preserve some natural habitat or what have you, I think it's incumbent on us to advocate for defining specifically what that means so that developers don't have loopholes with which to drive Mack trucks through. On the other hand, that's all like recommendations that we would bring to this council, and if the council doesn't want to enact those, then this body wouldn't be in a position to necessarily impose its own will, right, arbitrarily. At the end of the day, we are only here to essentially enforce the code as the code is written.
Now, you are working for a firm, you said it's based out of the UK, but your headquarters or your local office is in Philly?
That's correct, sir.
And your resume or your response indicated you'd be out of town 1 to 2 days a month. Is that pretty reliable? I mean, this...
It is.
Are you feel clear on the time commitment that's involved with this?
I'm clear that there will be Planning and Zoning Commission meetings on Thursdays, and that there will be ad hoc requirements to visit sites to provide, in-person survey and review of those sites. That's the
reading
job.
and reading.
There's going to be a lot of reading.
A lot
yes.
of reading. Yes. Yeah.
Fortunately, reading is not a problem. I enjoy reading, and in particular, I'm interested in planning and zoning and how we can make sure that the community is, protected from overdevelopment at the same time, have to act within the law and what ordinances there are.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next question. One of the statutory requirements of the Planning and Zoning Commissioners is that they be persons having the knowledge and experience to pass upon planning and zoning problems in connection with urban and rural development. Please describe your knowledge and experience in planning and zoning within Sussex County or another jurisdiction.
Yeah, so I have not actively participated in the past. However, I've been following closely the developments around Osprey Point, which is adjacent to one of my neighbors, and the developments there and the attempts by that developer to build a restaurant and a marina, which I take particular interest in. I know my neighbors have a lot of interest in that, and so that is to be fair. I think one of the reasons that this was when this opportunity arose more interesting to me is that I had been exposed to some of that controversy. I've heard from some of my neighbors and their points of view on that particular development and what the developer wanted to do there. And it dawned on me that we need to make sure that those voices are represented in the commission. And so, yes, that is my primary interest in this. Is I have seen firsthand there's development from this old golf course into housing development with 700,000 to multi-million-dollar homes, well, 1-point-something million-dollar homes, and attempts of the developer to build a restaurant and marina. Those are all things that if they're allowed by ordinance, I would think we would not oppose, but what I see is that there's a lot of community interest in those kinds of things, and that's happening all over Sussex County. And there's a need to make sure that we are looking closely at the ordinances to see that all the interests of the citizens are not just the developers, because I know that there's particular interest from some citizens that developers and folks in the real estate industry have inordinate amount of influence. I think we need to make sure that there's balance. And so, again, that's my primary interest, is that I see how that has played out. I see that sort of thing happening throughout the county, and looking at news articles, et cetera. I know there are a lot of angry people about all of this. I don't think we have to be angry. I think we need to make sure voices are heard and that we channel recommendations and changes to this council as needed so that we can strengthen the ability of planning and zoning to meet the needs of people so that they're not given reasons to feel angry and detached from decisions. So hopefully that helped.
Yes.
Any questions anyone has about that answer? Sorry.
All right. Next question. Please provide your views on the role of the Planning and Zoning Commission as it has or should have in the decision-making process of land use in the county.
Yeah, so the Planning and Zoning Commission is acting basically to enforce what the state and this body wants in terms of land development. We are not really in a position to legislate or create rules that do not exist. We create rules to our own detriment and lose credibility and create legal risk for the county, right? So we don't want to do that. What we want to do is to ensure that, you know, we find grounding in any decisions that would be made in the ordinances that already exist. And if we don't find that and we see that there's an area where we need to clarify rules, we would need to bring that, you know, through Mark or one of the other members of the council and recommend that we amend the ordinances.
Good. Sussex County currently operates within the 2018 Comprehensive Land Use Plan, known as the Comp Plan. Please describe your familiarity with the county's Comp Plan. Please provide your thoughts on the Comp Plan that was recently adopted and the role it should have on the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision-making process.
Yeah, as I read it, the plan encourages promotion of agricultural presence in the county, sustaining the existing agricultural developments and resources, and encouraging development of new agriculture. That's something I would obviously want to continue to support. Preserving natural lands, wetlands, and forestry. All of that improves water and air quality for the citizens of the county. And then we want to promote affordable workforce housing development in the market where workers are needed, and frankly, finding it really increasingly difficult to find places to live. Ideally, you know, housing that would afford them the ability to build wealth over time, which we know housing typically helps people to do if they own it. And then coordinating with the transportation department to make sure that investments are made in transportation. I think we all probably limit the delayed investment in infrastructure and in the transportation space as we get out on the local highways and find ourselves stuck in traffic.
Quick question on that topic of affordable/workforce housing. Just wondering if you have any thoughts on what the role of government should be versus the private sector.
As a citizen who has an opinion about that versus as a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission, because I think Planning and Zoning Commission may have a little bit more of a limited role. So I think to the question of whether or not we should, as a government, promote affordable workforce housing, my answer is yes. It's in the interest of everybody to be able to have a workforce that's actually able to sustain themselves and live in the areas that they actually are needed to work. It reduces traffic congestion. It reduces pollution. It actually improves connectivity between those people in the communities that they live and serve. And it reduces the creation of these, you know, artificial barriers that are created by people who are, you know, only the wealthy people can live in certain zip codes, and everybody else needs to live outside those zip codes and be bussed in to do the work and serve us at places that the wealthier folks live. I think that benefits everybody in the community. I don't think it is outside the realm of what the government should encourage. I think within the context of planning and zoning, there's a little bit more of a limited role. It's about, you know, approving what is, you know, mandated in an ordinance and ensuring that those things are represented. I do think maybe there's opportunity in discussing with Kim to do things with passing ordinances that might improve incentives to promote the kind of development that would create long-lasting connection between those citizen workers and the communities that they live in. So that's a kind of a limited scope, I think, for planning and zoning at this time, other than to make recommendations to try to improve that.
Right. I didn't know if you might have any thoughts on specific recommendations that, because you're probably aware that we've done some work in that area.
Yes. And so I think that public-private partnerships seem to be a model that works well, where maybe we provide some sort of incentives that will encourage developers not to build, in the case of Osprey Point, like the $800,000+ homes that we already probably have a surplus of at this point, but instead to build townhomes that can be purchased by people who are of moderate income, promote the creation of those in the neighborhoods that are close to the places that these folks work. Mixed-use development seems to be something that works really well in some communities. So a mix of commercial and housing development. I know that there are a few examples of that in Lewis, et cetera, that seem to be working really well. But that would be my my thought on
should government play a role in determining whether or not there's a sufficient number of high-dollar homes, for example, or should that be driven by the market?
So I am a capitalist at the end of the day. I am a Democrat, registered Democrat, but I am a capitalist. So
I'll hold that against
generally speaking, thank you so much. Generally speaking, I let market forces do as they will. I think there are some cases where market forces set the stage for actually damaging communities, and we have to figure out how we adjust for market forces that might go out of control from time to time. We've seen those instances where, I'll use the crypto example because it's the most outrageous one. Everybody jumped into crypto. A bunch of people made a lot of money. They got out at the right time. And then there are a bunch of people who are left holding the bag with a bunch of assets that are not worth anything. I think there's a role for government to prevent sort of silly things like that from happening. But at the end of the day, in that case, there wasn't any regulation to really stop it. So, and, I think our legislatures at the national level are not in a position to understand the technology and what was happening there in a way to regulate it. I think locally, in our case, there are probably examples where we want to, could you require a certain amount of development that a developer is building be for affordable housing instead of the multi-million-dollar houses or the $700,000 plus houses, right? That's up to the council to decide, right? It's not for this role to decide those things.
Agreed.
Yeah. Hopefully my answer is satisfactory. You may not agree with.
No. I'm just trying to understand where your thoughts are on it.
I believe in democracy, and if the people of Sussex County want to change anything, they should elect leaders who are aligned with those changes. If this body, which represents Sussex County, doesn't see a need to intervene in a certain aspect of the market where maybe things are not going as the citizens want, then that's, I think, the will of the people. So I respect that.
Right. Within the context of the law and the Constitution.
Within the context of the law, the Constitution, yes, of course.
Of course.
Yes. Absolutely.
Speaking of the comp plan, when we adopted this thing and dealt with it back in 2018, there was a lot of public meetings, public input. Did you attend any of those at all?
I did not. I was not a citizen of Delaware at the time, sir.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we'll move on to the next question. Agriculture is the #1 industry in the state of Delaware and Sussex County. Please provide your views on the agriculture industry as it relates to the economy and land use.
Yeah, so agriculture is one of those industries that's key to human survival, right? We would not all be here if we didn't have farmers producing food for us to consume. And I think that the food that's produced closest to us is the food that's best for us, typically. So I support a strong agricultural segment in our market and in the community. So it sort of contributes to also other aspects of what makes Sussex County a great place to live, right? You can't have a farmer's market in the community if you don't have farmers around. That's ridiculous. You know, you end up with everything shipped in from out of state. So the farmland provides a lot of valuable space for, you know, not just growing crops that we consume, but it's also spaces that wildlife live in, and it's you know, green space that helps to contribute to reducing some of the pollution that we might experience from all the traffic and from other things that are sources in the community. But at the end of the day, it's all about farms produce food. We all need food. The further away we go to get our food, the more expensive it is, the more costly in terms of the environmental and financial requirements that there are. And then those farms and the related agricultural business, they do improve the quality of life for local folks by allowing us to have things like the farmers markets that we frequent to get you know, local produce, honey, meats, etc. So I spent most of my life in a rural area, and so I have a high regard for agriculture, especially for small farms, but I understand that's not where the trend is, right? Industrial farms are kind of the path forward, it seems. So farming in general, I'm a supporter of, and ensuring that our agricultural economy is sustainable is important. It's important because we literally can't live without it.
Right, but from a landowner's point of view, if you're a farmer and you're a landowner, almost, well, the vast majority of your wealth is tied up in your land and your farm. And for many farmers, that's their 401k, so to speak. So it's be clear that, you know, that when people are interested in selling their land, it's oftentimes because they've worked a lifetime to accumulate that wealth, and they'd like to, you know, convert it to something they can monetize and enjoy. So yeah, that's part of what drives. We have an aging ag, you know, population, people that actually farm, and so that's part of what drives development as they sell their land, and so it's striking that balance can be tricky.
Indeed. So respecting individual property rights is also very important to me. There are cases where government sometimes overreaches and infringes too much on those. I recognize that's true. I think in this case, it's about what are the incentives that we could create that would make farming a more attractive thing, agricultural a more attractive thing for people to invest in. And so in the case of a farmer who wants to sell a tract of land because they are planning to retire and they want to sell that tract of land probably to a developer who's going to put up, you know, 50 to 100 homes or what have you, right? What are the things that we can do? And in planning and zoning, probably not a lot, right? Very limited there. But what could the council do to encourage retaining that as agricultural land? I don't know that there's a lot that can be done because you have a generation that's been raised by these farmers who don't necessarily want to continue to farm, and I can't blame them. It's grueling work. It's painstaking. I can't say that I have any interest in picking up hay bales or anything like that myself, and so I understand the desire to move away from farming for, you know, generations who've been raised by farmers. At the same time, we do still need that industry somehow, right, to exist. And so how can we find some solution to not lose that while also respecting property rights, because those are paramount in this case. So it's more about, to me, how do we create incentives, not how do we stop something?
Good segue. Next question is, please describe your views on property rights.
Yes. So I bought outside of a homeowners association for a reason. I want to be able to do with my piece of land what I would like to do within the law. And so I don't need any more governing bodies telling me what to do with my land. I do have a condo that is subject to a homeowners association, and they irritate me to no end. So to be clear, I am supportive of property rights. I'm a capitalist and also a supporter of property rights. And at the end of the day, if we're going to ask people to do something specific with their property, and I say we, meaning the citizens of Sussex County, we should encourage them, not force them to the extent possible, right? So if we want something to be done with a piece of property, what are the incentives that this council might be able to put on the table to help drive the development that we might want, instead of trying to force people to do things with their land that they don't want to do anymore? So in the example of the farmer who wants to retire, they're 75, 80 years old, and they're ready to pack it in. I don't blame them a bit. They should sell their land and go to Florida. How do we find a way to get that, or wherever they would like to be? How do we get that land to be productive in the way that Sussex County gets the most benefit from it, retaining the character of our community? And that's all about the incentives. And if we don't have the right incentives in place, obviously things will continue to develop as they have been, and we will have development that continues to get ahead of our infrastructure, which planning and zoning is not in a position to stop in any way, in my view. I think we're in a position to enforce the rules as they are written. I think coming to you with recommendations around, hey, there's this program that I have heard about someplace else, which I think is partly about how do we learn from other communities, what they're doing, and bring that here to say, hey, there's an idea from somewhere else.
You're leading into a question I was just about to ask. I was wondering if you'd had an opportunity to, review or study ideas that other jurisdictions have employed that have experienced the same things that we're experiencing.
I haven't dug into it recently, but in my past life, long ago, I had a good friend who was the economic development advisor for a county in Virginia. And there were specific incentives that I know she was recommending to try to encourage. In that environment, they wanted to encourage industrial development, right? How do we build up some sort of industrial base, because we didn't have any in a rural community that was dependent on 2 universities and farms for the economy. So I think in that case, it all boils down to almost always the incentives and what's the money that we're willing to put up to try to encourage development to be the direction that we want. And we know as a community, we don't have endless resources to build highways and roads and bridges so that we can just continue to put more infrastructure on the ground to support, ultimately the exploding growth that we've seen over the last few years. That's probably not going to be sustainable. The state probably won't make the funds available to infinitely build highways and roads, and the developers probably don't want to fund that either. So I know there are some cases where you could put requirements on the developers around helping fund those things. I have a little bit of a problem with that, only because if it's something that we are okay with the developer doing as a people, the infrastructure, I think, should be something that we're collectively accountable for as a state and as a county. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't extract some sort of price from the developers potentially, but that's my view is it's a combination of incentives and also, some fee requirements perhaps to try to steer people towards the right kind of development that this council representing the citizens of Sussex County wants.
Okay. two more questions, pro forma questions here. The Planning and Zoning Commission meets on Thursdays every other week with its regular meetings at 3 p.m. In addition, special meetings are held when necessary. Are you able to fulfill this requirement and attend the meetings, the necessary meetings?
Yes, sir.
And last question, as an appointed official of the Commission, the potential for a conflict of interest with an application is always present. Do you have any known or anticipated conflicts of interest that may present themselves as a member of Planning and Zoning Commission that would affect your ability to serve?
I do not, sir.
Council, that ends the applications and application questions that I was prepared to provide. Certain you may have additional questions.
I got maybe one or two. Do you have any experience with the real estate industry?
I've been a landlord twice, so I currently have a condo that I rent out. Other than that, no. I have, some friends who are in the real estate industry, but I am not a realtor. I don't have any interest in being a realtor. I see what that life looks like, and sorry, I'm looking back at my realtor friend who's here supporting me, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, I don't think I want to spend my Sundays touring, 5 or 6 houses that nobody's going to make an offer for. So, sorry, Joe.
And I guess one of the things is, so this is all, you're aware of all this, a member of planning and zoning or county council, once an ordinance is introduced, your conversation and what your decisions are strictly based in this chamber in a public meeting.
Yes.
You would not be outside talking to your friends about their views or their concerns, or that's very, very important to understand that whatever decision you would be part of rendering would be from meetings in this chamber, either your own meetings or the county council meeting. That's public record, but you're okay with that?
I am fine with that.
Okay.
That's as it should be.
Okay.
Should have transparent decision making based on what's in the law.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Anybody? Okay.
I don't have any further questions. I don't know what the desire of council is as far as next steps go. Of course, we do have an additional interview today as well, so it's up to what the pleasure of council.
We could do either way. Personally, I think we need to hear from both candidates, and then we need to defer at least a week to understand all they've said to us and read the notes we took while they were talking versus sitting here and trying to do something on the fly.
And I would like to thank the council for the time to speak with you and for entertaining my application. I really do appreciate it, and I do hope that you'll see fit to approve my application and appoint me. So thank you so much.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for volunteering.
And please do reach out if you have any further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like me to move to the next interview?
Yeah, they would defer on both of them.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. The next interview will be for Mrs. Green's position. It's our understanding that Mr. Hopkins is going to resign at the end of his term, at the end of this month. We appreciate his services. Ms. Green would like to nominate Mr. Mitchell. Welcome, Mr. Mitchell. You have Mr. Mitchell's application in front of you, which was provided a few weeks ago, and we will go through the same script. Unless, Ms. Green, do you have any opening comments?
Yes, I do. I have nominated Bob Mitchell to serve on the commission for the Planning and Zoning in the 2nd Councilmatic District. Bob is a landowner, and he has a good understanding of property rights. He comes from the rural area of Greenwood, and he has a great appreciation for our #1 industry in agriculture. Bob is a businessman. He is not a developer or a realtor, and he shouldn't pose any conflicts of interest in the decisions that he makes. He will make his votes according to the code, and I believe that Bob will be an asset over the years as we make adjustment to our land use map from the pressure of as the pressure of development grows. Bob is a man of integrity, and he is a man of his word, and it is my honor to place him for your consideration here this morning.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Welcome, Mr. Mitchell. We'll go through the same series of questions that we had in the previous application, and I'll start with Please provide a narrative of your background and why you want to serve as an appointed member of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, Cindy, for the nomination, maybe. So my background, I've lived in Delaware my entire life, 55 years. All but 8 of those years have been in Sussex County. The first 5 were in Kent, and then I have the privilege of actually living in all 3 counties in 1 calendar year. And in Newcastle, when I came home from work one night, my wife sensed that I wasn't quite myself, and she asked, "What's wrong?" And I said, "If the bridge falls down, I want to be on the south side of it." And so we moved back home to the farm, a little farmette that I was raised on, and built a house. And that's where we've been, and we've raised 3 children there. When I moved there when I was a kid, it was dirt. That road was dirt. County Road 632 wasn't called Utica Road. It was just County Road 632, RD1, Box 55A-3. You know, even back then we saw some development because the numbers kept going from, 55, and then there was 56, but then there were 3 houses built in between them, so you had all these different numbers. So I'd say all that just to set the stage that I'm familiar with Sussex County and the growth that's happened. And that's sort of my background. My wife grew up on a farm that is currently an active farm today. Her father leases out the land, and you're absolutely correct. Farmers, their land is their 401k, and property rights are extremely important for those farmers. I was at Keith Carlisle's house, a farmer in Greenwood, last night, getting a check signed to take to the conservation district today, and we actually talked about it just a little bit. I saw his spreader going down the road, and his sprayer, going down the road, and we talked about how difficult it is for farmers just to get their equipment around today with the growth in our county. So I just say all that to say that I've seen it. I've been a witness to it for a long time. We raised 3 kids here, and we still have 2 of them in the county, and we're trying to get the 3rd one back. Talked to him yesterday. He's down in Florida. It's hard to get him back from there, but we'll see what happens. So that's who I am.
All right, thank you. Next question. Have you ever served on any boards or commissions that have decision-making authority? If yes, please describe your experience in serving.
I have. Currently on the St. Johnstown Ditch Committee, which sounds about as revered as it sounds, but it's an important thing. The tax ditch committees are very important. Nobody thinks about it until it rains a lot, and then everybody wants to know why there's flooding in certain parts of the field. So that board is made up almost entirely of farmers, and the secretary there needed to retire. He's having some health issues, and he asked if I would take it, and I said, not a problem. So that's the board that I currently serve on. Just recently, within the last year, resigned from the board of Delmarva Christian High School, where I served for 10 years. It's where my 3 kids attended high school. An extreme supporter of that institution. I believe they've been a real asset not only to parents and students, but also to the county in general. And that was one of the best experiences in board relationships as I've ever had. I was asked to be the treasurer when the treasurer stepped down. Thankfully, that treasurer came back when his schedule allowed, and I gladly gave that part of the responsibilities back to him, but stayed on long after my kids had graduated just because of the respect I have for that institution. I've also served on smaller boards like Nanticoke Little League. It's where my son played, even though we lived in Greenwood. I could literally walk out of my office onto the field, so I thought it was more important that I was there than that he played in my hometown. And really enjoyed that, as well as the House of Hope, which was a organization that no longer exists, that was attempting to build transitional housing for women. So those are the 3 boards I've served on, or several.
All right. One of the statutory requirements of planning and zoning commissioners is that they be persons having the knowledge and experience to pass upon planning and zoning problems in connection with urban and rural development. Please describe your knowledge and experience in planning and zoning within Sussex County or another jurisdiction.
So, knowledge and experience in planning and zoning. I have some knowledge of it, don't have a lot of experience with it. I have, when we first put our mobile home on our property 36 years ago, I did have to come to planning and zoning and ask for a variance back then because it was required. It's less than 5 acres. I've been to planning and zoning before, or excuse me, sorry, to county council before, but that was for a zoning issue. I've been to county council for other zoning issues, but only a couple, so I don't have a vast amount of experience. I believe the whole point of planning and zoning is to interpret and apply the laws that are written in the zoning code as well as in the comprehensive plan, and to put all those things together and make exceptions where they make sense and where it would benefit the community, and not to write code, not to create laws, but simply to interpret them as they're written, and then provide any recommendations later as you see things that might be improved upon.
In the last few years, have you attended any planning and zoning commission meetings?
I've been to a couple, very few, thankfully. Haven't really I wasn't necessary to be there to have anything changed.
I'm going to start to say, what capacity did you hear? Did you hear to testify before them or present something?
No, I actually went. I came to one because they were having a special meeting on. It was not that long ago with the COVID money for the Sussex County Housing Trust Fund, and kind of trying to figure out the best way to use that money, and to kind of give some of my thoughts on that, having been in the mortgage industry for 30 years.
Have you ever read any planning and zoning commission decisions for any reason? Have you gone
Yes.
back and looked?
Yeah, I have, actually. Mostly just within the last month,
Okay.
since Cindy approached me on this.
Okay. And as I'm back to ask the first gentleman, do you have any experience with the real estate industry?
A little bit.
Now, explain that to us.
Not as a realtor. I've been in the mortgage business for 30 years. I sell money, kind of is what I say that I do, and I help people buy homes. And in part of my bio that I forgot to read, over the last 30 years, conservatively 1,500, 2,000 people, mortgages that I've done to help people either build here where they grew up or to move here. And I own some real estate. I bought and sold and flipped, I guess you would say, some houses. Almost, I don't work exclusively in one area or the other, except that it's all residential. But I will finance the banker's second home in Rehoboth just as much, and actually I get a lot more enjoyment of financing the home for the person who's buying their first one in Seaford or Laurel. So that's my experience in the real estate world. I've seen the changes. I've seen the increase in prices for sure, and that's my experience.
In that capacity, do you have any interaction with developers?
No, I don't go in on the initial stages at all. In fact, most developers have their own mortgage companies, and they push business that way because they can make money on the mortgage as well as on the house, and they push the business that way by offering incentives like, we'll give you a free sunroom if you use our mortgage company. So on the initial stages of developing, or even in the initial phase of building out, it's rare that we are financing a home in those initial stages of development. No.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Next question. Please provide your views on the role the Planning and Zoning Commission has or should have in the decision-making process of land use in the county.
Well, I see their role as more of an interpreter of the existing code rather than creating code for it. I put in my notes here that you guys have, I tried to relate that to what I do in my job, and I see planning and zoning kind of as my processor. Like, someone comes to me and they apply for a loan. We gather the information. There's an application that gets submitted to planning and zoning. There's documentation, a lot of it, that gets submitted to planning and zoning that has to be read. And we take all that information in, planning and zoning committee does. They study it, they visit it, and they go and look at what exceptions that could be made that the person is asking for. So they're not there to create obstacles. and they're not there to grease the skids. They're there to interpret the code as it's written.
All right. Next question. Sussex County currently operates within the 2018 Comprehensive Land Use Plan, known as the Comp Plan. Please describe your familiarity with the county's Comp Plan. Please provide your thoughts on the newly adopted Comp Plan and the role it should have on the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision-making process.
When I read that, when you said newly adopted, I'm assuming you're talking about the 2018 plan.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Because my familiarity with it, all 285 pages of it, is more of a 30,000-foot view rather than digging in, although there are certain parts of it that are explicit, and I would say it's the heart of the document, is the future land use program, or future land use plan, excuse me. How are we going to take what we currently have and how do we want that land used? And that is not an easy task. And I'm not telling you guys anything, because you guys sit up here and write the legislation for it and come up with the plan. It is a balance between property rights and the responsibility of those people who have that property. It's a responsibility. Rights cannot come without responsibility. And so it's a responsibility to the whole community to make sure that, you know, nobody's going to open up a chemical plant down the street from a housing development. You know, we have districts and we have zoning areas where things can happen or can't happen before they're built or before they come into fruition. It also gives people some forethought on how to invest their money, and it gives me as a property owner, as a homeowner, again, that protection to know what can or can't come into my neighborhood. And so it's extremely important, and the comprehensive plan use, I feel at the heart of it is that future land use. It goes into a whole lot of other things after that, things that are near and dear to my heart, like affordable housing and things like that. But to me, for planning and zoning purposes, that is the heart of the matter.
A quick question on that. I think you indicated in your comments, in the written comments, that in your opinion, excuse me, in your opinion, the comprehensive plan fell short in some areas. What areas do you feel like it fell short? How was that?
I think it specifically fell short in projections of population. I mean, nobody really anticipated the explosion of growth that's happened in our county over the since 2018, really, particularly during the pandemic, and just the growth and the explosion of the population that wants to be here. And having lived here all my life, you have to see that balance between, you know, you can't just get here from Baltimore, Pennsylvania, wherever you come from, and then say, okay, there's enough people here, let's shut the door. I mean, that's not how it works. But no one saw that. I'm sorry, to your specific question, no one saw exactly how much our population was going to grow, and it far exceeded the estimations as far as building permits and all of that. So that's where I feel the comprehensive plan fell short. The 30,000-foot view, it is truly a comprehensive plan. It's huge. But in that regard, which has a lot to do with future land use, where are these people going to live, where are they going to build their businesses, et cetera.
How would the plan have been different if the population projections had been higher?
Well, I think if the population projections had been higher, it could have created a little more injection of capital into infrastructure improvements, which is kind of where we're at. I mean, I live on the western side of the county, and I would say that the majority of people who live on the western side of the county don't want their part of the county to look like the eastern side of the county anytime soon. It's not that they don't want growth. It's not that they don't want opportunities for their children. It's not that they don't want to build houses. It's that we want to be able to get to them in a timely manner and not sit all day in traffic, because our infrastructure got outpaced by development. And I think if we would have, if that had been a consideration, then maybe some of the infrastructure plans could have been coordinated with DelDOT and with the state as far as where to put money into road construction, into egress and that into these areas, rather than kind of coming behind it and doing it in the way that I feel like we're doing it now, especially from anything east of 113.
So should developments be denied if the infrastructure is not already built? I'm not sure where you're going with that.
Well, I'm not going anywhere with it. I'm just simply stating a fact that our infrastructure does not easily handle the amount of growth that we've had. And so on the eastern side of the county, we got to catch up. And on the western side of the county, we got to make sure that we're prepared. So I'm
Still trying to make the connection between that and the comp plan, because the roads are not us. That's the state.
Excuse me?
The county doesn't do roads, so I'm trying to.
No, but the county coordinates with the state of Delaware. It's in the comp plan with DelDOT and with
Right.
traffic projections and all of that stuff.
Right.
And if they had projected that there would have been 15,000 homes instead of 5,000 homes, then DelDOT would have said, hey, if that projection is accurate, then we need to get some money down in there. We need to, maybe the clover leaves that we're building now might have been put in 2020 instead of 2024, 25, 26. Those kinds of things to create traffic flow rather than what we have now, which is a bunch of people that have GPS on their phone, myself included, that says, how can I avoid Route 9? How can I avoid 404? I left for a meeting to go in Rehoboth from my office in Seaford last Wednesday, and I always do that. I punch it in my phone before I leave, and it came up, and it said to get to, not downtown Rehoboth, but just on Route 1, an hour and 1 minute. It takes me an hour to get from the center of the Bay Bridge to my house in Greenwood. And it's going to take me another hour to get to Rehoboth. I mean, on a Wednesday at 10 o'clock in the morning. I mean, that was, our infrastructure is catching up. It is trying to catch up. I'm not trying to beat anybody over the head. I'm just stating a fact and looking. And so when you asked about what the deficiency is in that plan, that really is the only major deficiency that I see in the plan, is that we kind of missed the projections. I don't know that anybody could have known the growth that we've had, but we missed it, and we're paying a little bit of a price for it right now.
Okay. Next question is, agriculture is the #1 industry in the state of Delaware and Sussex County. Please provide your views on the agriculture industry as it relates to the economy and land use.
Well, there's so much of that agriculture touches. I mean, when you say the word agriculture, most of us think of the farmers, of Keith Carlisle taking his John Deere out there and plowing a field. But it's so much bigger than that, because our poultry industry drives our economy. I know I can't tell you how many people loans that I do for people who work in our poultry industry, particularly Millsboro, Georgetown, Milford. It's huge. I should have looked up the numbers, but I'm sure it starts with a B, in the billions of dollars that end up back in jobs, in housing, in businesses all throughout our county. And so to me, my wife grew up raising chickens. That was the one thing she asked me that I would never make her do. So that's why I don't own a poultry farm, and that's why I haven't operated my father-in-law's farm, because she said that's the one thing she won't do. So I don't. When I was a teenager, I worked for Allen's Hatchery, so I used to deliver biddies on the bus. I'm pretty familiar with the industry, having grown up here and having plenty of friends that are in it and do it. So it's very, very near and dear to my heart.
I do have a question. I want to back up. I apologize for this. I missed this a while ago.
You're fine.
I know you've been here a long time. So did you participate in any of the land use public forums on the drafting of the land use plan? We had about 50 or 60 of them around the county for a year. Did you go to any of those?
I went to one meeting, and when you asked that guy that, I'm like, I went to somewhere. I think it was in Milford. Did they have one in Milford? And
I'm sure there was.
But this is probably, what, 8, 7, 8, well, it's 2017, 2016, somewhere in there when they were doing them. Mm-hmm. I went with a group that was saying, hey, they're doing this new thing. But I've slept since then, so I don't remember a lot of the specifics about it.
That's fine.
They were held around the county at different places.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. We held some, P&Z held some. There was a lot of opportunities. Thank you.
I think one was in my mind, it was at Carlisle Fire Company.
It could have been, I'm not sure.
Or it was somewhere in Milford. I mean, that's right on the cusp of Sussex County, but there was something north Sussex.
Thank you.
All right. Last question, please. Last big question. Please describe your views on property rights.
Well, I kind of alluded to it before. With every right comes responsibility. We seem to have lost that idea in our nation today. If you just doesn't take long, watch YouTube. Everyone wants to demand their rights. No one wants to have the responsibility that comes with them. Some people say it's my right to be able to have all this open space, so that farmer should not be allowed to develop. That's not the case. That farmer and his family probably owned that property long before a lot of these people that are complaining about it are born. And so there is an inalienable right to property rights, whether it's just the guy that owns a lot that his house sits on, or whether it's the farmer that owns tracts of land, or whether it's the developer that bought them. So within the confines of the comp plan and the legislation that surrounds that, with development and zoning and everything else, that's where you have to find that balance, and it's always a balance. And you're definitely not going to please 100% of the people. You're lucky if you please 51% of the people. But someone said earlier that this is a democracy. It's not. It's not a democracy. It's a republic. There are laws, there are ideas, there are thoughts, and property rights is a big part of it. In fact, it's the number one part of any developing nation is the guarantee of property rights. And so that's where it starts. And then from there, as a county council looking out for everyone, you have to look at what are the responsibilities for that person that has those rights.
All right. 2 pro forma questions. The Planning and Zoning Commission meets on Thursdays every other week with its regular meetings at 3 p.m. In addition, special meetings are held when necessary. Are you able to fulfill this requirement and attend the necessary meetings?
I am. In fact, before I told Cindy that I would do this, I checked with my boss, Dan Primo, who's very much into, giving back to the community, and told him of it, and he's very supportive of it and said that would not be an issue at all.
Okay, and as an appointed official on the commission, the potential for a conflict of interest with an application is always present. Do you have any known or anticipated conflicts of interest that may present themselves as a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission that would affect your ability to serve?
I do not.
Okay, Council, that concludes my interview questions. If you have additional questions.
I will go back to the previous gentleman. My last thing, you do understand that if you are appointed to Planning and Zoning, that any decision that is made from what's on the public record in your hearing or a county council hearing. And once an ordinance is introduced, your conversation is over with the public. Whether it's your neighbor, your father, whoever it is, everything you decide on has to be made in this chamber in a public setting. You understand that?
I do. In fact, I spoke with a member of Planning and Zoning who even went further than that and said, if someone calls you and says, well, what do you think I should do? At that point, you say, well, here's a phone number to the staff at P&Z. Please give them a call, because if you talk to me, I'm going to have to recuse myself.
Sure.
So, yeah, certainly in the mortgage business for 30 years, discretion and keeping things private is just second nature.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is that all? Anyone else?
Any more questions, anybody? I would recommend that we defer so we can think about all these things. We've heard them. Both candidates have explained to us and stated to us and understand it.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Bob.
Hey, thank you.
If I want to make that motion,
I'll make that motion.
Motion, Mr. Hudson. Second, Mr. Riley, to defer all these 2 applications.
For 1 week.
For 1 week, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yep. Any more questions, the council? We'll take the vote. Mr. Shaver? Yes. Mrs. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Riley?
Yes.
I have a yes. Motion carried.